What if you and two of your dumb friends decided to explore the Blair Forest? The same one from the local legend that says a witch has been haunting it for centuries. You're all hyped up to film everything for your documentary, but soon realize the legend's a little too real once you get lost and start getting harassed every night by some devilish force. What would you do to escape this hellish place in one piece? That's the story of the Blair Witch Project, a 1999 movie that became a milestone in the found footage horror genre, setting up franchises like Paranormal Activity, Hell House LLC, and many others. I'll break down this cursed story, point out what the dumb characters should have done, and roast what they actually did. But first, bless that subscribe button and join the channel so we can finally hit our dream goal of 300,000 subscribers. And don't forget to throw Grandma's crucifix on the like button to complete the divine protection ritual. The movie kicks off with a message saying that someone found tapes in the Blair Forest showing the adventures of three clueless youngsters who went missing a year earlier. The trio of idiots was never seen again after entering the cursed woods, and now we finally understand why. In the footage, we meet Mike, Josh, and Heather, a girl with one of the dumbest ideas in horror movie history, going into Blair Forest, a place known for being cursed by an evil witch. She convinces her friends to document everything and interview the locals in the mysterious town of Burkittsville, which back in the day used to be called Blair. Over the centuries, some very strange things happened in the area, and the locals decided to change the town's name to shake off the bad juju. Among these creepy tales, people mention Rustin Parr, a hermit who lived in the woods and kidnapped 7 kids in the 1940s. He took them all out in his basement, always in pairs, while one of them was forced to stand in the corner. The trio also meets 2 fishermen who tell them about a girl named Robin Weaver. Back in 1888, she vanished in Blair Forest for 3 days, then suddenly reappeared saying she'd met an old woman whose feet didn't touch the ground. Of course, this only makes the wannabe filmmakers even more excited since they'd also heard another tale about 5 men who were supposedly sacrificed in a ritual deep in the woods. The weirdest part? Their bodies vanished into thin air. Naturally, Heather and her crew decide to head straight into that same part of the forest known as Coffin Rock. Here's your first survival tip. Never step foot in an area everyone says is cursed by a witch. If generations of locals keep repeating that warning, chances are there's something to it. Take the hint and stay far away from the devil's playground. Forget that advice because they go marching into the woods anyway. After hiking uphill and getting tired, they decide to set up camp. They roast marshmallows by the campfire, but the fun's over the next day when they stumble upon an old cemetery with 7 piles of rocks, one of which Josh knocks over by accident. Things go south fast, because that night they start hearing sticks snapping in the dark. Since the trip turns out to be a lot scarier than expected, the group decides to head back down the mountain to find the car. But surprise, surprise, they have no idea how to get out. For some reason, the paper map doesn't seem to lead to the road, and night falls again, forcing them to camp out once more. Let's break down their screw-ups. They went into the haunted woods completely unprepared. First off, none of them are experienced hikers. Second, I highly doubt any of them took a crash course in witch-repelling magic. I'm not even gonna suggest they buy a satellite phone. That tech wasn't widely available back then. Only rich folks had access to it. Still, they could have brought emergency flares in case they got lost. And honestly, a firearm wouldn't hurt either. It's like I always say, wandering around the US woods gives you a solid chance of running into bears or coyotes, and those guys aren't friendly when the fridge is empty. Since the Second Amendment allows anyone to buy a gun, Heather and her crew could have packed one too, but nope. They prefer to be delinquents and bring nothing useful. That night, they hear the sticks snapping again, and the next morning they realize they're in deep trouble. Someone built 3 piles of rocks right next to their tent. Panic sets in, and the trio decides to keep walking south. By the way, they only have a paper map and 1 compass. Another genius move. Paper and rain don't mix, so if it got wet, they were screwed. They should have brought a backup map and a second compass since that stuff breaks easily if dropped. And sure enough, their map mysteriously disappears and everyone starts blaming Heather for losing it. She swears it's impossible since she slept with the map in her pocket. Luckily, they still have the compass, which they use to keep heading south. Doesn't take long before Mike snaps and starts yelling for help in the middle of the forest. which, spoiler alert, doesn't help much. Eventually, Mike confesses that he got frustrated and threw the map into a creek, which leads to a massive fight when they realize they're completely lost. Uncle Ed here would have gotten out of that forest easily. Here's the trick: they'd crossed a creek earlier. Experienced hikers have a saying: follow the stream and you'll find civilization. Rivers don't climb mountains, so if they'd just followed the water downstream, they would have made it back to town without all the suffering. But no, instead, they wander deeper into the woods and start finding creepy voodoo stick figures hanging from the trees. Guess what they do next?
Who cares?
The dumb trio sets up camp in the middle of the woods again. Around midnight, everything seems a little too quiet. Well, until they start hearing weird noises from the forest, including the laughter of children. At that point, they're so scared they could power a Wi-Fi signal with sheer panic. Things get worse when something sinister starts shaking their tent, forcing the idiots to run into the woods and hide until morning. When they get back to the tent, they find all their stuff trashed, and Josh's gear covered in slime. A few hours later, the dream team stumbles upon a river that looks exactly like the one they crossed before, realizing they've been walking in circles the whole time. Okay, I said they should have followed the river, not wandered away from it, but whatever. I've got another idea. One of them could have climbed a tree to get a better view of the area and maybe spot a nearby town or village. But nope, because Josh has a brilliant idea. He volunteers to stay outside the tent and keep watch while Heather and Mike sleep, which in my humble opinion is a monumentally stupid move. They have zero means of defending themselves, and up to this point, the witch hasn't attacked them directly, probably because they've been sleeping together in the same spot, so splitting up, terrible idea. What they should have done was light torches around the camp, because everyone knows hundreds of supposed witches were burned at the stake for centuries. So maybe, just maybe, the Blair Witch would keep her distance from a bit of fire. Since I know you don't want to be as dumb as these donkey-brained characters, here's one more important reminder. Forget that though, because Josh disappears the next morning, and Heather and Mike fail to find him. That night they hear his screams echoing through the woods, but there's no sign of him anywhere. The dynamic duo figures out that the witch might be mimicking Josh's voice to lure them out of the camp. The next day, Heather finds a bunch of twigs tied together with a piece of Josh's shirt. When she opens the bundle, she finds another piece of fabric soaked in what looks like cherry syrup, along with a little Kinder Surprise containing teeth and hair. Horrified, she keeps it secret from Mike. That night, she finally breaks down, filming herself apologizing to their families and admitting she had no idea how to hike. She'd only watched some random educational TV show about it once. On the final night of the Blair Witch tour, they hear Josh calling again and follow the voice to the ruins of Rustin Parr's old house, the same guy who supposedly murdered those 7 kids in pairs. At the entrance, they see demonic symbols and bloody handprints all over the walls, which pretty much confirms that the witch was hosting her own Don't Drop the Soap festival with her victims. Anyway, they go inside searching for Josh and head down to the basement, where an invisible force attacks Mike, causing him to drop his camera. Heather rushes in screaming, and her camera catches Mike standing in a corner facing the wall. She keeps calling his name, but the guy's playing the world's creepiest game of freeze tag, not moving an inch. The Blair Witch herself finally attacks Heather, who screams as her camera hits the ground. Damn! The movie got tons of praise from critics, but audiences? Not so much, and I'm right there with them. When I first watched it back in the early 2000s, I thought it was garbage. You can barely hear anything coming from the forest. The camera work looks like someone filmed it with a bad case of carpal tunnel, and there isn't a single decent jump scare to make it worth it. On the bright side, the acting's pretty solid, so my final score for the Blair Witch Project? A 5 out of 10. At the box office, things got absolutely insane. The Blair Witch Project became the most profitable independent film of all time. It was made on what basically amounts to pocket change and a bologna sandwich, around $200,000, and ended up grossing over $248 million worldwide. Naturally, it became a direct influence for the Paranormal Activity franchise, which pulled the same trick years later and made a fortune doing it. By the way, stick around till the end of the video to check out my breakdowns and how to defeat guides for that franchise too. A year later, the Blair Witch Project got a terrible sequel called Book of Shadows. It's pure garbage, and honestly, I wouldn't watch it again if it were up to me. But since I know you guys love watching me suffer, I might bring it to the channel if you drop the phrase I want it in the comments. The grand total in the Blair Witch Project is 2 victims, and the Golden Corpse trophy goes to Heather. Mostly because, well, there wasn't much competition. I hope you liked the video, see you on the next one, and bye!